Welcome to the Consciousness Anywhere and Everywhere podcast. I am Shannon O'Hara, and I invite you to a completely new world of possibilities. Welcome to the wild, wacky, and deeply healing world of Talk to the Entities and the Consciousness Anywhere podcast. You are tuning in to a Talk to the Entities specialty spotlight series. If you've missed the first 2 months of spotlights, those are available for you to go back and check out if you're interested. Children and entities and addiction. There will be many more episodes of Talk to the Entities spotlights on all sorts of different topics. So if you're interested in everything spirit consciousness related, you're in for a big treat. Today, we're covering something that I will admittedly say is weird. It's something called walk-ins. Now, prepare yourself for a potential identity crisis. This is one of the more difficult concepts to grasp in the whole spirit world conversation. But once if you can allow this information to land somewhere in your universe, there is really nothing but this that could potentially create some really dynamic changes for people who this is relevant for. So walk-ins means when you have one body with a current occupant and another entity walks in to that body. So this becomes an interesting conversation based on a lot of the spirit prejudices that we grow up with, definitely in European descent cultures. In European descent cultures, we don't even believe in ghosts. And obviously in Asia and Africa, it's different. They do believe in spirits and ghosts. And there isn't always a practical education or empowerment. In fact, there is a lot of anti-practical, anti-empowerment education about spirits in Asia specifically that can lead people to being very stuck with entity stuff. And it's not an area that they are given really any permission to have consciousness in. That being said, when you look at this concept of having one body, having a body that has a being that's animating that body, and you have another then being that comes in and occupies that body with the previous or current occupant, one must ask, is this a good thing? Is this a bad thing? And what if it's neither? What if it's neither good or bad? And what if it's also good and bad? Now, what do I mean by what if it could also be good or bad? So I see the walk-in possibility as ultimately a universal recycling system for bodies. Now, I know that this might sound creepy or weird, but hear me out. I'm going to go into some not particularly fun things to look at and talk about, but we have to if we're looking for greater consciousness and we really want to change our lives. There are, it's like if you're listening to this and it's like there are a lot of people who don't want to live. You might have been one of those people. I myself was one of those people. For many years of my late teens and early 20s, wanting to die, not wanting to be here was a huge influence on me. And is that good or bad? Well, I believe in choice. So I don't believe that living is right and not having a body is wrong. I believe that we could include beings with different kinds of bodies than ours in our societies, cultures, families, and relationships. And that would be a more conscious society. And where we're at right now on planet Earth in 2025 is that you have to have a body to even be acknowledged. And then if you don't have a body, you are pretty much excluded from society, from reality even. And that's just incorrect. There are many beings that don't have bodies like ours that exist on our planet in this world and also in other realities. And this isn't like, I'm not trying to be airy-fairy and woo-woo. I do believe that there will come a time that this is common knowledge and it's not treated as superstition or new age religion or stupidity. It's actually seen as the way it is in the world. So if we included all beings and judged none, would that change your whole attitude around having one being or entity step into or walk into a body that already has an occupant? Walk-ins is the universal recycling system for people who don't want their body anymore. And this is true. There are many people who don't really want to live, who don't want their bodies. And we put a huge amount of energy as a species into maintaining and supporting life at all costs. Oftentimes, our societies are putting the most energy and resources into the weakest link, the people who are the sickest, the weakest, the people who who cannot have a sustainable future. I know that this might sound callous or grim. And the thing I'm trying to get at here is that death is not wrong. And what would it take for all this stuff about death to no longer be a wrongness? Death is a transformation of energy, full stop. Fact. So when cells die, when organisms die, there is no actual death. Energy never ends. The energy that occupies, that animates your body, will literally enter back into the ecosystem or enter forward into the ecosystem, just like a tree. Just like any other organic organism, it goes into the earth and that energy is utilized for fertilizing the future. Death is part of our world. And again, we have to get away from this concept of death because nothing dies. Everything changes. So with the walk-in thing, if somebody wants to die, and I know that can come from usually a lot of trauma in a really heavy place. And when somebody doesn't want to die, essentially what that does, when somebody wants to die or they don't want to be here anymore, it puts out this body's available sign into the universe, literally. And an entity will see that sign and come to take over the body. The recycling system for bodies. Now, I don't know if that sounds weird to you. I don't know if that sounds kind of practical and cool to you, because to me it sounds really practical and cool, but I know I am extremely weird. Hello, it's me, Shannon, in another outfit, in another time and place and space. If you like these podcasts and you're interested in greater consciousness, I invite you to check out a club that I conduct every month called Club Consciousness. It's a group facilitation session where I have people from all over the world who are seeking greater consciousness who get together to do in-depth dives into what facilitates greater awareness, greater ease, greater possibility, using the tools of Access Consciousness together. This is the kind of place where you surround yourself with people who desire something different, who are willing to use the tools, and who will contribute to more peace, more space for all of us that choose it. Check out Club Consciousness to have more fun. So that's the good thing, that there's this choice universe where if somebody wants to die, that's a choice, and they can let another entity have their body and they can then exit the body and go on and make different choices. Where this walk-in situation becomes a bad thing is when this is done unconsciously. And this is a lot of times what we're dealing with and talk to the entities, where you're going to have one body with multiple beings because the walk-in process was never acknowledged or honored or recognized. And this is, so you're a walk-in if Well, you know you're a walk-in number one if you ask, do I have walk-ins? And you get a yes. Like that's like the easiest scenario. And when you're dealing with entities a lot of the time, if you get a yes, no, yes, no, yes, no, that means yes. If you do not remember your past, this can oftentimes be an indicator of a walk-in scenario or situation because you weren't the being that you are now wasn't there. You were not there for those memories. Bodies do have cellular memory, so you will be assimilating a lot of memory from your body and other people networking you back into the matrix through their point of view about you. They sort of feed you into the previous identity of the body. And this is where walk-ins becomes difficult because people don't acknowledge that the previous occupant has left or wants to leave or is no longer going to be the primary entity animating that body. And they then don't get to know the new entity. A lot of times the walk-in phenomenon can be identified when somebody has some sort of situation where their body goes unconscious through a trauma, a drug overdose, car accident, some sort of trauma, or even a surgery, which is a trauma. And I hate to say trauma because a lot of times it occurs through trauma, but it doesn't have to occur through trauma. But the point is when the body kind of switches off, there's like a moment of switch off where the nervous system goes into some sort of relaxation state through unconsciousness a lot of the time in this example that I'm giving, and then a new entity will walk in. I'm not sure if beings can walk into the body without that switching period. I've just known that is the majority of the way in which I've seen it working with others, and I've experienced it myself. I'm a walk-in. It is more common to have bodies that have beings that walked in after the body's birth than not. It is a really common phenomenon that if we can include it, can give us so much more information about, here's the point I was starting to make. When somebody goes through some sort of trauma, take the significance out of the trauma part, but just when somebody goes through some sort of reset where the body switches off and then switches back on, through accident or drugs. And then that person, and then it seems like that's a different person. And this is a thing I have heard repeatedly throughout life where people are like, yeah, my mom went in for this surgery. And then when she came out of the surgery, it was like she was a totally different person. Like, I just don't know who my mom is anymore. And you'll hear this, and you might even be able to relate to this. Somebody you know who had a car accident or went through something. And you see this a lot with people who go to war, talk about number one trauma, or who are people who experience a lot of abuse. They change. And when we say they change, it's literally potentially a change of entity. And if you knew that you were no longer talking to the same being that you used to know, and this was a completely different entity with different personality, with different preferences, with a whole different expression, would that help? Would that help you actually recognize what's going on? And then how could we then support the beings that we're walking in new to be included and to set the previous occupants free? So if you want to read about my walk-in story, it's the last chapter of the first Talk to the Entities book. I walked into this body in my late 20s, or in my body's late 20s. I had a horseback riding accident in Perth, Western Australia. The body came off the horse, hit the head, completely blacked out. And when the body woke up, I was there. And I remember that the story's in the book, so I encourage you to read it, especially if you're interested in entity stuff. And yeah, the first Talk to the Entities book is essentially my story of growing up as an entity-aware person, going through the ease of it as a child, the nightmare of it as a teenager, and then the empowerment of it as a young adult, growing and developing into greater consciousness. So when my body came off the horse and blacked out, I remember before I came into the body, there was a choice. The body could go on to have a brain injury, a head trauma, and live that way. Or I had to choose to come back into the body and live. And I came into the body, and when I entered the body in the body's late 20s, I had amnesia for 3 days. I couldn't remember why. I was like, everything was brand new. I couldn't remember why I was alive and where I was. I couldn't remember what access consciousness was. Everything was gone. And science, or, what people currently think they know about this is due to brain trauma. And this is true, but if we go bigger than that, what if the choice precedes the physical expression? So the choice to walk in to this body there had to be a situation through which the previous being could break its tie with the body and I could walk in. And that was achieved through falling off a horse. Would I have loved to have done it more consciously? Absolutely. Did that with less pain? Absolutely. Was that process just what it took to get to the next step? Totally. So I walked into the body. I had 3 days of amnesia, and around like 5 or 6 days after the horse incident, I was with my really good friend Dane here, who is the co-founder of Access Consciousness, is a magical, powerful, beautiful being and incredible healer. And the neck was so effed up from falling off the horse. Like, I really needed help. And Dane, before he became a magic wizard of consciousness, was trained in chiropractics. So I asked him, I was like, can you please help me? Like, my body really hurts from coming off that horse. So I lay on this table and he's touching me and he goes, Shannon? I was like, yeah. And he goes, Shannon? And I was like, yeah. Who are you? And in that moment, it was the first acknowledgement of that I was a new being that was occupying this body that Dane had known previously. And I could perceive me in the body, and I could perceive the previous occupant that had this body standing next to the table. And it was so profound. And the previous occupant was basically waiting, number one, to be like given permission to leave, essentially. And she had one request, which is, will you take care of my mother? That's a funny, interesting last request. But beings have all sorts of stuff that they want to handle before they leave. And that was her request. Will you take care of, our mother? And I said, yeah. And then the previous occupant that inhabited this body from age conception till late 20s left. And if you can go back and talk to people that knew the previous Shannon and then knew me, the second Shannon will testify that my personality completely changed. And I'm really lucky because I'm surrounded by people who think differently, who are flexible in their points of view of reality and ask questions. If I didn't have Dane's help, if we didn't have the tools of entity awareness, the previous occupant and I would have been stuck together for who knows how long. And we're totally different beings. And what occurs when you have multiple walk-ins or multiple occupants as a body is this is where you start getting this, where you can never make a decision because the whole committee, every entity has a different point of view. These are the people who hear voices. These are the people who are diagnosed with multiple personality, because literally they have multiple entities with different personalities. This becomes a very practical application when you can recognize how the entity stuff works, that how we define ourselves as entities, like I am Shannon, I am a female, I am American born, this is my point of view, this is my identity. If you adhere to or become very stubborn about your identity, which was what defines you as an entity, it can inhibit transformation and you having access to other energy for when your body dies. Are you still going to be your name, your gender, your nationality, your point of view? No. You're an infinite being with infinite energy, and you are conscious. In one way or the other, you're going to expand into choice. And that's really what occurs in the death/change process, is transformation and choice. If you're good at choosing in life, you're going to be good at choosing in the afterlife. If you're horrible at choosing in life, you're not going to be particularly good at choosing in the afterlife. And that's why we get a bunch of entities who are stuck and lost. They're not choosing. So I know this is a weird conversation, and I thought it was so interesting we were putting the whole walk-in spotlight focus so early on in the Talk to the Entities specialty spotlight focus, because it is one of the weirder things to deal with entities, because it so challenges our identity and our sense of personality and like personal space. And it just is what it is. And if you can expand your mind to include entity awareness, I wonder if this could assist, how this could help. If you're interested in the walk-in thing, there is a full walk-ins specialty class that is a class I conducted quite some years ago. And there will be dripped out throughout the month more content focused on education, empowerment, and information around this, dripped out through social media. In the on the Talk to the Entities, if you go to Talk to the Entities Instagram, that's primarily where it's going to be. And in the email that goes out at the beginning of the month with a link to this podcast, and also sort of like the spotlight essence of the specialty this month, walk-ins. And there will be a Talk to the Entities facilitator roundtable where myself and 2 other Talk to the Entities facilitators talk about and share information, education, stories, experiences around this topic. So we got your back. We're here for you. I don't know if you think this is weird. I don't know really how people hear this information. I know for me, it was sort of like life. It's like an essential life information for me. Without this information, I would have a lot harder time. Without the information of Talk to the Entities and sort of the tools of entity consciousness, my life would be torture because I am an entity sensitive person. So if you are an entity sensitive person, or you know somebody that's entity sensitive, like, let's do this. Let's get entity aware. Let's get entity positive. Let's create a world where all beings are included and none are judged. And we just get out of the significance, out of the superstition, and into the creation, the receiving, the clearing, the communication with entities, and come out of the dark ages and into a lighter, brighter, easier possibility. Yeah. How does it get better than this? Bye, guys. Thank you for listening to this show. My target is to make consciousness easy to find and choose. So if you enjoyed this podcast, please leave a 5-star review on iTunes and share this with somebody who you know who might be looking for more consciousness in their life. You can visit me on shannon-o'hara.com or talktotheentities.com. And to learn more about the amazing tools of Access Consciousness, you can visit accessconsciousness.com, and be sure to subscribe to the podcast.